Deal, which we adopted almost a year ago, and which is our new growth strategy. And it aims to bring sustainability from, let's say, more of a niche to the mainstream. And here, every sector has to contribute, and that's why I'm very pleased today to have this talk in order to see how together we can bring the important sector of brewery to higher sustainability levels, building on a number of initiatives that we have already taken, Farm to Fork, the Circular Economy Action Plan, but also our forthcoming initiatives on sustainable product policy and sustainable food, so that we can work together to make the sustainability story a success and a positive experience to all. So, as was already mentioned, a full life cycle approach would mean that we have to start by the start. So, where beer starts with the crops, don't go through production, transport, but also the way how we deliver the product, and also how we deal with end-of-life aspects and residues. So, all this matters in a fully circular approach, and I will be indeed very much interested to hear the insights today and also to answer your questions on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rosalina. Even Stefanik.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so proud to be a part of this very active community as the president of Beer Club in the European Parliament. I'm absolutely sure that the brewing industry is a very typical industry, and it has not only economical but also social role in the European economy. European brewing sector employs indirectly 2.3 million employers, so it is a very important job creator. It's very important also from export perspective, and I know that currently we have challenging time for every kind of industry, even for brewing industry, which was actually growing in last 7 years, but now in times of crisis there are new challenges. From European perspective, we have a political objective, which is our common objective, to create carbon neutral economy by 2050, and I'm very happy that yesterday and today this goal was discussed from many perspectives, and brewing industry is very active and it is part of this common goal. So from European perspective, there are many financial instruments in order to help to achieve this goal. Particularly, I'd like to mention Recovery and Resilience Fund, and I do believe that brewing industry will also be part of this fund and will use also the resources for green technologies, new technologies, and I'm looking forward to our discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Mark Demersmaker, 60 seconds, sir.
Good afternoon all to you, and thank you for inviting me to this panel debate. I'm a Belgian senator. As you know, Belgium is an important beer country. It's in our cultural DNA. We produce a lot of specialized beers. In 5 years' time, you should know the number of beer producers has almost doubled in Belgium. So it is a booming business here. With 2.5 billion liters of beer a year. We are the second largest importer of beer in the European Union. Now, I'm a senator, and the Senate in Belgium consists of representatives mostly of the regional parliaments. And what I can tell you from my perspective is that the notion of green deals is not new to us. The Flemish government has this experience of concluding green deals with different sectors in the economy. In 2018, the Flemish government concluded a deal with the brewing sector in Flanders. It's running from 2018 to 2020, where the focus is merely on sustainable water use. Why? Because the bigger picture in Flanders is growing problems of water scarcity. There is a big blue deal also that the Flemish government has made to resolve these problems. It's one of the most important resources and raw materials in the beer sector. This Green Deal now is forming a learning network of brewers, government, technology suppliers, and so on. It's halfway now. And I can say there are already some remarkable results if you look at the first reports that we have seen already.
Thank you, Mark. Excellent. We'll come back to those points, and particularly the water will be a big part of the discussion today as well. Paolo Lanzarote, great to have you with us, sir. 60 seconds.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me just start by saying that as a board member of the Brewers of Europe, how happy I am that this forum has actually happened. I think it shows it is an important forum. I think it shows our commitment as an industry to sustainability. I think it exemplifies and has exemplified collaboration, not just amongst brewers, but amongst all stakeholders. And it's been a forum for shared experience. And I think that will be an accelerator of action. I think the key point I want to make is around the role of business. It is key. We are key, and we can enable and accelerate change. I've seen this in our business. Rosalina mentioned it earlier on in how we have moved sustainability from something we do to the center of our strategy. We do that at the local Brewers Association and also at the Brewers of Europe level. It's already been mentioned that directly and indirectly, we employ about 2.3 million people across the 10,300 or so brewers in Europe. Importantly, over 90% of that 2.3 million people are actually outside of our direct control. And I think that's a great segue into we can't do this ourselves. But we are integral because we are part of the social, economic and community fabric and at scale. As Asahi, we have very clear priorities around carbon neutrality, water scarcity, circular packaging, sustainable sourcing, inclusion and well-being and responsible choices. There is a lot to do. There has been much done. And this is the decade of action. And it's crucial as brewers that we look beyond our own walls and look for collaboration and partnerships to make significant and sustainable change happen. It's important that we keep on making the small incremental steps, but it's important also to execute against the bold commitments tangibly and at scale. So for me, it's not an either or, it's a both and.
Thank you, Paolo. Excellent. Even let me come back to just to ask, what can the beer producers do to really accelerate in the concept of the European Green Deal and the farm to fork strategy? What's the contribution to be made there?
Well, should I start?
Oh, yes, please.
Yes, Brian, thank you. There are a number of, as I said, all the sectors in the economy have their contribution to make, and we are aware that some are already quite advanced, and indeed some still have to catch up. But as regards, in particular, like the beverage and beer industry, one of the most important elements next to indeed working on better energy efficiency is for instance dealing with the packaging issue, because this is one of the major impacts of how we actually produce and consume beer, and not only but many beverages as well. And here, for instance, we saw that the packaging waste generated reached the highest level since measurement started. So, and this is, for instance, a trend that we would like to reverse. We would like to see more use of packaging, and here we see that actually beer is not a bad example, because there is quite a lot of reuse, in particular in the, let's say, more business to business segment, so in the bigger packagings, but for instance, where there could be still good practices that could be more taken up are in the business to consumer sectors, in order to ensure that there is indeed more reusable packaging, and that the packaging is actually reused. So that is a very important element. We have also had some even live projects funded by the European Union on how to use residues from production for feed, or how to utilize, for instance, yeast for several, so the residues from production. But what, as I said already, what the life cycle approach also teaches us is that it's important to have a more holistic view, and then to make sure that the various life cycle from the production to the end of to the end of life are tackled. But at the same time, I'm very much aware also what Ivan said about the current the current challenges to the beer sector, because the crisis has hit quite heavily this sector as well. And but nonetheless, we think that it's still possible to
Okay.
both be on the path of recovery and at the same time take this opportunity to encourage more sustainable practices and to invest in more sustainability
Let me
in
put
all
this
sectors.
to Paolo. Paolo, innovation's core to achieving this, isn't it? That you've got to recover from this crisis, you've got to move towards the Green Deal, and you've still got to make a profit somehow out of this. What is happening in terms of innovation within the sector?
Well, Brian, you've touched on a number of issues there. I think innovation is key. How we design new packaging solutions from scratch. So how we work towards not just a recycling mentality and a reuse mentality, but also an elimination mentality is critical. Rosalina mentioned it. I mean, the beer industry starts from a not bad position. B2B and B2C. So across our business, we see already, between keg and returnable glass, something in the order of 1 in 2 beers sold in returnable packaging. So we start from a good place, but that's nowhere.
I spoke yesterday with one of the big 3 producers, and they were saying that part of what they're doing with cans in particular is to glue them together. So actually, there's no other packaging associated with it. Is this the kind of thing that you see being tested more and more, where you're aiming for zero waste?
Absolutely, zero waste is the solution. So elimination is the solution. It will take some time. There are a lot of individual solutions out there that we're working on individually as organizations. I think the big thing that we can do differently is to move much more to a collaborative approach within the industry, for the industry, and across the supply chain. So we've talked about packaging. I want to talk a little bit about carbon, if I may. I'll come back to innovation in just a second. I can give an example. So, we buy cans. We buy cans from a number of can producers. We sat down with one of our partners, and we did a long-term agreement with them, and basically helped them move their can packaging production facilities closer to our production sites. So the advantage for them is they get obviously an anchor customer. The advantage for us is we get better working capital. We're in the business of making business. The advantage for the planet is we reduce schlepping across Europe permanently in the footprint. So both within the brewing community, but also with our supply chain partners. Just on innovation,
Let me put this to Mark, and then we'll come back to innovation in just a second. Mark, in terms of what Paolo's just described, does that resonate with what you've done in Flanders in terms of the collaborative approach that's been taken?
Yes, well, to elaborate maybe on, I've been working as a former MEP on the revision of the waste directives. So in terms of sustainability and the problems with the packaging, it is key for the sector in the first place to make sure that they design their packaging in a way that it can be recycled without any problems. And then, of course, it's up to the authorities. And I think in Flanders we have seen some good examples of that. You have good collection schemes and, of course, sorting and recycling facilities. This is something that we have taken up as well in the revision of the EU waste directives, with new targets all over the EU, and it is key, of course, for all the member states to implement them as good as soon as possible.
Thank you. Ivan, when we talk about making the best contribution, do you see the beer industry as a leader in this recycling and the circular economy, and as something which can be benchmarked as a sector in progress for the Green Deal?
Yeah, I think so. Beer industry is really ahead. They started with transparency, which I do appreciate very much. They started with labeling. Now they continue also with contribution to Green Deal. I think we have to talk also about the whole food industry, but beer industry is definitely the leader, and I'm happy that I can at least co-create legislative framework for that. But I really appreciate all the initiatives in terms of water circularity, packaging, in terms of renewables, because they do a lot of projects in terms of renewable energy and energy saving. So I think beer industry is really ahead.
Okay. Paolo, just to bring you back, your sound was a little off. We were losing you earlier. Just you were saying about innovation before the sound went off a little bit. You want to continue with that? What is innovation at its core for the beer sector? Is it about making more money? Is it about being socially responsible? Is it about responding to consumer needs? What's pushing the agenda?
Look, Brian, it's all of the above. But objective number one happens, I think, sustainably if you meet objectives number 2 and 3. So as part of our sort of growth commitments and sustainable commitments, we want to give people choice. We recognise that we produce a product without natural product, but increasing is important too. And so we've committed that by 2030, at least 20% of our portfolio will be non-alcoholic. So our innovation strategy, I think, needs to talk to both consumer demands, sustainability, and ultimately profitability. And I think the 3 actually go together.
Excellent. Let me bring back to Rosalina. We're in the middle of a crisis, and we just can't say when that's going to come full circle and allow us to breathe again and literally sit down over a beer and to discuss this. What's in the recovery package to assist the industry, and not just in terms of support for suppliers and support for those at the front line of the retail, but also in terms of innovation? What does Europe put on the table for this moment?
Well, I think that the recovery package that Europe has put on the table is unprecedented. That will generate basically trillions of investments, and supporting the business and innovation would be very important as part of that. Of course, the recovery package, it would have to be channeled quite quickly to the member states, and they have a key role in also making sure that those funds are spent for green investments. But next to the recovery package, of course, we have also the usual European budget, and of course, Mark will know very well about it. And indeed, it was nice also to remember those times when negotiating the waste directives. But there will be quite a lot on innovation, both under the horizon for pure research and also under the LIFE program. I already said that there are 2 projects, for instance, for use of residues that are that have been supported by the European Union that I know of, and of course the one element is innovation, but then the other is also taking up of good practices and actually making it happen. And sometimes it's not about groundbreaking innovation, but exactly about making sure that those changes that are geared more towards sustainability happen on the ground. And the other element, which also Ivan mentioned, on the climate neutrality and the support for renewables and to clean up the Energy Act, let's say that would be something that would be very much in the focus as well, because we have the target to spend 30% of our EU budget on climate mitigation, and also for the recovery and the resilience facility we have a target of 37% actually on that. Okay. So on the general let's say the energy efficiency aspects and renewable energy, there will be quite a lot of support, but also a lot of support directed towards, let's say, other environmental, dealing with other environmental issues, and including the waste part, of course.
Let me put all these issues to Ivan as well. Ivan, we have a question from the audience from Henry Varga. It's about the future of the importance of biodiversity and the future of the brewing industry. Henry asks, what can the industry do to impact policies like CAP?
Definitely they can ask directly MEPs, and there is a lot of ideas currently. This week we are discussing at the plenary session new structural changes in common agriculture policy. There is a lot of different ideas, so I communicate directly with brewing sector, but also with small farmers. So at the European Parliament, we are open to all the changes, but generally, CAP changes will be tackled in order to support small farmers, to attract more young people to do farming, basically, and also to implement this farm to fork strategy. So basically it means to reflect also green technologies and to make agriculture greener.
Thank you. Mark, Mark, you've done a lot of work on different elements of the environment, and the CAP is going through some reform, but people tend to forget that the beer industry is absolutely anchored in agriculture as well. What do you think the industry can do to impact policies like CAP?
Well, what I see here in my region is there are a number of small breweries who really try to do an effort to work together with organic farmers, to make deals with them. And I must say, when I was looking into this subject the last few days, that the sector really feels that they have this responsibility, that they want to go ahead. But of course, they are looking indeed for. It is not easy. It has a lot of challenges, and they are looking indeed for support for the authorities, regional support authorities, but also the European Union. But they can have a real contribution, and they want to do contribution. That's what I see from a number of local smaller breweries.
Are they looking at, as you say, like organic and more artisanal producers,
Yes.
perhaps? But do you see this driving a change through the whole market as well? Is this the beginning, or the early stages, at least, if not the beginning, of a new sensitivity to the environment within the brewing sector?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, there are, I see a lot of startups for the moment. As I told in the beginning, the number of breweries has doubled in 5 years' time, and the number of beer producers who are not brewers themselves, but who are making the recipes and so on, and then source it out to other breweries, they have more than doubled. They are all in this niche of special beers, special products. A lot of them find their way on the market, and this is and even in export already.
Yeah,
so
Belgium,
I think this is
Belgium approached this with microfinancing for microbreweries, for financing for microbreweries as well over the last few years. This was a specific government initiative in Belgium, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yes, it is a niche where we are quite successful for the moment.
Excellent, thank you. Paolo, 20% of your produce being non-alcoholic beers, that's a big turnaround. This kind of innovation, is this really consumer driven, or is this governments requiring greater sensitivity?
It's absolutely.
So we're having more problems with your audio, Paolo, sorry. Let's see if we can get that back.
Health and well-being trend.
Let's see if our team can give you some assistance with the audio there. Ivan, let's go back to you here as well. You worked with Coca-Cola. You led Coca-Cola in Slovakia for some time as well. And this the change within the market in terms of what consumers demand. How sensitive does big business need to be to the demands of the consumer in this side, and particularly in the brewing sector? What's the dynamic that's taking place at the moment in terms of sustainable activity and how the brewing sector is altering its offering?
Well, first of all, let me highlight what Mark has already mentioned, and this is the trend for microbreweries. There is a lot of new breweries, particularly microbreweries, also in Slovakia and throughout the whole Europe. This is the continuous trend, and this is coming also from the consumer, because consumer likes to make their choice. Consumer likes variety choices, so consumer is asking for some innovation. So it comes from consumer wishes, and this is the same talking about non-alcoholic beverages or beer or other food products. So I think from a legislative perspective, we have to just create the best legislative framework in order to make consumer happy, and in order to have a business to be profitable and prosperous and sustainable. And also, I think what is now general trend, not only in Central Europe, but everywhere, this is this awareness about improvement of environment. So improvement on the environmental standards, and this Green Deal is not coming as the political decision. Basically, it is coming also from people's awareness that they have to do something more in order to save the planet. So I would say this is also the general trend which will influence the business sustainability and also consumer wishes for a long-term future.
Excellent, thank you. Rosalina, we have a question for you. Doesn't say who it's from, but would proposed measures take money from the innovation schemes of the companies and push them into taxes?
Sorry, could you repeat
Sure.
the question? So it was innovation versus taxes, and I
Yeah.
know, but what was exactly the link?
Would proposed measures take money from the innovation schemes of the companies and push them into taxes? I think what's meant here is with the support package, the recovery support package, which supports innovation, just seeing money come back out the other side and higher taxes against the industry. That's my take on it anyway.
Well, it's difficult to answer that question because, as such, government budgets are there, and normally the income neutral. So it's the two issues are not directly related, but we are aware that taxation has an impact on innovation, and for instance, as part of the own resources. To have own resource that is linked to the amount of plastic packaging waste that is not recycled. So that is one of the things. But and there are, for instance, certain VAT measures and then some other forms of, let's say, incentivizing industry to innovate.
Okay, so basically, innovation should be incentivized, and taxation should be there to curtail bad behavior.
Well, taxation is there to, first of all, to raise money to spend for the common good. So, and then part of this common good is to encourage innovation, and that's why there are a lot of European funds and funds at national level that encourage innovation and research. So that is it. And of course, when we talk about providing incentives to business, they can be done both through economic instruments and through also regulatory measures, and this is the kind of the balance that we are looking at. To what extent we should indeed provide incentives, both positive in terms of funding activities, encouraging member states to make those taxation reforms that would incentivize innovation towards sustainability, and at the same time providing rules in order to ensure that there is kind of a level playing field on that. So it's a policy mix always that gives the best results, and it's let's say not one more expensive the other. I know that it seems like a bureaucratic answer, but it's really like that.
You navigated that well. 10 points for that. Paolo, you want to respond there?
Yeah, no, I just want to add a comment. I don't think it's a good idea. I think the brewing industry has shown. I think balance is important, but I think the brewing industry has shown, under the guidance of the Brewers of Europe, that actually when we're serious about self-regulation, we execute against it. We've shown that with the ingredients labeling. We've shown that with self-regulation around responsible messaging. So I don't think taking money from innovation and transferring it into taxation is a good idea. I do think that there is a need for greater impetus, both within the brewing industry, but also outside of the brewing industry, to enable greater financing around infrastructure changes. If we could get more money for reforming the energy sector towards a green economy, that would move us massively in the direction of
Then let me put a question to Paolo
renewables.
of this as well. So Hadrian Goddenham, he asks, with the emergence of biofuels, is there a competition on sourcing of malt and could be used for bioethanol? Paolo?
No. So the simple answer is not that I'm aware of. I think that there will be, and there should be, a mix of renewable energy sources, from wind to solar to biofuel, and as we go further into the future, other new sources. So no, I don't think so. Can I come back? Because I think you lost me. I was trying to fix my internet. If you asked me around non-alcohol, I've switched everything else off. It's called prioritization. So you asked me about non-alc and whether that's a consumer-driven or a producer-driven trend. I think both. Absolutely consumer-driven. Health and well-being is critical. It's to many more consumers post-COVID than it was before. We're seeing demand, but it does also require industry to get behind this. And the reason we are so passionate about it is because we believe that we can produce fantastic non-alcoholic beers and give great taste choices in the same occasions to consumers that choose in that occasion to not drink an alcoholic beverage. So I think
the reason I asked this question, the reason I asked about the alcohol in the context of sustainability is it indicates a type of behavior. And so if the responsibility of the brewing industry is being seen to be so active and so responsive, shifting to such a large degree, 20%, that does this mentality transfer to the economy as well? Will consumers push the change and consume more?
They already are, Brian. They already are.
And do you have some statistics on that? What's the shift at the moment?
So broadly today, non-alc accounts for somewhere between, on average, 3 to 4% of total beer sold, broadly. But it's growing at high double digits year on year consistently. So 20% is a big number. It's a very ambitious number,
sure,
but it's not a number so far away that we can't see a road to that. And in some markets, Slovakia is one, non-alcoholic beer already today accounts for about 1 beer in 6 sold.
Okay, and do you see the same kind of shift? Can you do the same kind of branding exercise with eco-sensitive alcohol as well?
It depends on the proposition.
Okay.
We need to be mindful, balance of our responsibility around responsible messaging. So brand extensions will be treated in one way, and standalone brands can be treated in a separate way.
Okay. Fine. Ivan, we're looking now at biodiversity, and we'll talk about packaging in context of waste management as well. Water supply in this mix as well. What does the European Parliament understand in terms of managing the water supply within the brewing sector?
In terms of water supply, we talk about particularly about circularity. It is a part of circular economy. So we target to minimize waste, and target is, of course, the best target is zero waste. So it is the part of circular economy. We increase our limits. Basically, also in terms of our other activities, we try to increase and support renewable energy sources. As of next year, we put the ban on non-returnable plastic products and so on and so on. So all of those recommendations and directives, basically, they are part of better environment, and they are contributions to Green Deal.
And also in terms of more efficient processes as well, is water being managed more effectively within the sector? Is water consumption being reduced within the brewing industry? Ivan?
Yes, yeah, definitely. The price of water will increase. Definitely, it will be more and more scarce resource. So definitely, it will be pushed economically, but also from environmental protection point of view, this source will be taken more carefully.
Okay, Mark Demismarker, you mentioned water earlier in terms of the Flemish model as well, and the concerns that the Flemish brewers have. How is water being managed in Flanders? And is there a pricing element? Is this environmentally driven? What's the rationale?
Well, the rationale is that we have the last couple of years we have really encountered severe problems with freshwater supply. We will, with climate change and all that, we will have to take into account that water is more and more very valuable and scarcity and drought. The last summer, for the first time, we had municipalities here in the region where I live that were without any tap water at all. So we have to take very care of our water layers, our aquifers, and knowing that the brewing industry uses, of course, large amounts of water throughout their process. They can be part of the solution, and and this is very good to see in this Green Deal that Flemish government has concluded with the sector. That in 2018, halfway now, we started with 9 breweries. In the meantime, a lot of other breweries have joined this Green Deal to look for ways to reduce the water, to increase reuse, recycling of water. And the first results are really very promising. And the good thing here is that the network that they make with government, but with other brewers, with suppliers, and so on, is really a learning network that can that can exchange good practices, and in that way, it is a real leverage to finding or to be part of the solution.
Thank you. Rosalina, there's clearly a technology transfer element here which comes from the brewing sector to other sectors as well. How, at a European level, do we manage water scarcity and learn quickly from other sectors as well? What can the brewing sector contribute to the wider European dimension of water security?
Well, the water element and water security and water supply becomes more and more indeed prominent, also with climate change, and this is one of the key elements. And of course, there is the picture is different in different parts of Europe. Of course, some are experiencing water scarcity, others are not in such a dire situation. But of course, in order to make sure that there is sufficient use of water, and then here I will again go to the economic instruments, proper pricing is very important. So that the signals first come through the pricing, and then here we are talking both about fresh water supply and also wastewater treatment. So this is something that is very important. And then water reuse as such, it's a main part of the circular economy narrative, exactly because this resource that we will experience scarcity in many parts of Europe more and more in the future. So it's important to invest in innovation and to make sure, of course, every industry is peculiar in that, because it depends on how the water has to be cleaned up and then how it can be used. But there are a lot of practices in doing that, and here the wastewater treatment is also key in order to be able to put back
on the chat just now
the water
as well.
into
Seraphine, she says there is a need for a pan-European framework for wastewater, and she adds the different discharge limits for breweries in different countries, resulting in extreme differences. Rosalina, why are there different limits in breweries in different countries, and why are there extreme differences across member states?
Well, there are certain general rules, and here we are actually going to revise the wastewater treatment directive. But on this issue, I think that, like with many other elements, there are limits to harmonization. Of course, we are always interested in looking further into where does it make sense to have a European level playing field, and a lot of elements will be tackled under the revision of the wastewater directive, which is actually coming next year. So very happy to receive inputs on that.
Thank you. Paolo.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with an anecdote. I worked 9 years in India, and I woke up one morning and one of my breweries was underwater on the western side of India, and another brewery on the eastern side of India had the water switched off. So water is very, very close to my heart. I think I'm going to go back to my opening remarks around incremental and exponential. We work very hard to reduce the amount of water that we use in our processes within our breweries. And I'll give you some numbers in just a second. But less than 10% of our total water footprint actually happens within our breweries. So we have to work with our supply chain partners, with the farmers upstream. And to build on what Mark was saying, this has to be a collaborative effort. In the Czech Republic, for example, we have a Water for Hops program. In Italy, we have Campus Peroni, where we bring together, we facilitate conversations between the producers, so us, the brewers, all brewers, government, local government and central government, NGOs, academics, specialists, engineering companies. So to find solutions that are for the common good. So I think it has to be a collaborative effort. I mean, our numbers have decreased massively within the breweries. Just 10 years ago, we were north of 4 litres per litre. As we sit today, our best-in-class breweries in Asahi are 2.5 litres per litre. On average, we're about 2.8. Our target for 2030 is 275 average. It doesn't sound like a lot of a move, but actually, the closer you get to zero, the more potentially the solutions to eke that number down will result in an unintended consequence in increased carbon footprint. So therein also lies some of the complexity around prioritizing which of the sustainability initiatives we will prioritize above others.
And which would you be inclined to prioritize? We have a whole host to choose from. So, is it really truly a mix to contribute most to the Sustainable Development Goals?
So I think it is a mix, but if I had to call out one, which is an obvious, clear, and present issue for everybody everywhere, and that's carbon neutrality. Okay. Everything has to, in my mind at least, subordinate to that.
And how does the brewing sector aim to move towards that neutral position?
Well, I think the brewing sector can and will make its own moves, but it does also need help from government in terms of regulatory infrastructure and also standard setting. What we can do is make long-term investments either on-site or with partners, as we have done in the Netherlands, for example, Grolsch with Twents, in Poland, the virtual PPA that we have there with a wind farm, which is now part of RWE. So we can make the financial commitments, and they're good business commitments as well as good sustainable development commitments to move in that direction. But to really build impetus, we need a stronger, more clear, more predictable regulatory framework going forward.
Okay. Just before I put this to some of the panelists as well, just the idea that this is just a European issue as well. We have global suppliers for agriculture products which are used in the brewing sector as well. Do you think there's a level playing field for European farmers in this? Paolo? Maybe.
Look, I think it's not as simple as yes or no. It depends on. In some of our countries, absolutely yes. Some of the provenance rules that we choose to live by and stand by have a positive impact on local producers. But I don't think it's as simple as yes or no.
Okay. Thank you. Rosalina, just on the same issue as well, are European farmers facing a level playing field globally? Are European brewers being compelled to act in a way which is challenged by perhaps dumping from outside of the European Union?
Well, I would say that that perhaps in as regards farming, it's the least well, one of the less problematic areas, because we have the common agricultural policy that helps farmers as well to be competitive, and with the new common agricultural policy, hopefully to also help them to be more and more sustainable. So with having more and more solutions that contribute to the whole sustainable life cycle of products as well, because as we in the very beginning of this conversation we started, beer starts indeed with the farmer, with the crops, and how they're produced. So we have a whole policy in the European Union, the common agricultural policy, to help farmers. So I think that in this area in particular, it's because there are some other areas, for instance, in technical goods, for instance, where we are thinking about this carbon border adjustment mechanism, where we really face severe difficulties. Perhaps I'm not saying that there are no issues, no, not at all, but perhaps they're of a lesser the gravity than in other areas, and but here again, I mean, this kind of indeed local solutions, shorter supply chains, they're very important to increase sustainability, because we see that transport is one of the key impacts in the production of many consumer and in consumption of many consumer goods. So building those local value chains, both in terms of sourcing and also in terms of consumption, is very important. And what here Mark said, that there's so many little producers, actually this is a very good science, because these are exactly the basis first to increase, let's say, local cohesion, to create local business opportunities, and also to have positive environmental impact by shorter supply chains. So that's a very positive development.
Thank you. Even the product environmental footprint for the brewing industry as well. Are you encouraged that this is moving the right direction, or there are still substantial bottlenecks which are beyond the capacity of the industry to move, that they really need government and European government help to achieve this?
You mean, Brian, now about brewing industry or agriculture, or?
Brewing, but the whole supply chain, because we could deal with one side with imported grain for one example, which I think Rosalind has answered quite substantially, but you've also got aluminium perhaps used for cans as another one, or other products which are imported, plastic resin which is used for packaging, things like this, or wood pulp as well. So all these elements, these are not just produced within Europe. How is our global supply chain working, and is the brewing sector in need of more support from European government, from member states, to be able to achieve a more robust environmental footprint for its products?
To some extent, yes, but let me highlight that beer industry is also quite important exporter. It exports 32 million hectoliters a year, so it is not only a significant job creator, but also exporter. Yeah, to some extent, it does need some help, particularly, for example, if you mentioned aluminium, there is more and more import into the European Union, and it's also our demand to have the same environmental standards, for example, for aluminium and for steel producers as well. So there is a lot of discussion about so-called carbon duty for import on products coming from non-EU countries into EU. So definitely we will talk more and more, and we will implement more and more such kind of measures in order to motivate also non-EU countries to improve environmental standards, and also to somehow to protect EU market and to help EU industries. But if I may comment
Sure.
agriculture a little bit, I'd like to highlight the fact what Rosalina has mentioned already, and this is about small farmers and local communities. I think it's very important. Competition should work. Competition is positive, and if there is really a lot of competition, and it should be also in agriculture among small farmers, so it can help the whole supply chain, the whole value chain. It can help to improve efficiency and productivity, and at the end also sustainability for the whole food sector, not only for brewing industry.
Okay, Mark, how do you see this? You worked on the trade side of this as well a bit. You know, our global network as well. Do we need to be more robust in our trade policies to benefit the brewing industry, supply chain, and its sustainability ambitions?
Oh, I've never worked on the trade side of this, but well, to build on what has been said already, throughout my work, on environmental issues, sustainability issues, I've always met sectors that feel very responsible. That sectors that realize that they have to work for more sustainability throughout the economy, and the brewing sector is no different in that. They feel that they have to move ahead, and I believe a lot in innovation, and I think there the role of the European Union is obvious, and I hope that they will keep on promoting innovation and funding innovation, also in the years to come, where maybe the budget problems will be bigger. But I'm a bit afraid, and I hope that you can contradict me. But if I see in the budgets to come that funding for like Horizon 2020 programs is a bit problematic, then I hope that in the future the EU will be will be there to stimulate innovation also in the future. And for the rest, I think that by promoting and by incentivizing the sector, indeed to work together with all stakeholders, also with the government, and that we have seen in Flanders with this Green Deal. This is so important that it has increased the communication and the dialogue between the brewing sector, between the different breweries, suppliers, but also with the Flemish authorities, also on the level of legislation and implementation of some of the legislation. This has really helped the sector to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Paolo, you mentioned the massive reduction you were speaking about in terms of water consumption as well, but in terms of technology transfer, you mentioned India earlier and the diverse circumstances faced on the subcontinent. What can the European brewing sector do in terms of global influence, technology transfer, best practices, and having a global impact, particularly, as you mentioned, there's a capacity to do this in water supply, clearly?
I think water supply is one area. I think carbon neutrality is actually, going back to the point I made earlier on, a bigger area. I think we have a greater need, and in line with the Green New Deal, I think Europe can lead and should lead, certainly within my organization. When I look around the globe, we have the most fertile ground, let's say, for action. So best practice sharing, technology sharing, open sourcing of innovation. I don't believe that innovation in the area of sustainability should be used for competitive advantage. By competitive advantage, I mean long-term competitive advantage. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years isn't long-term. I think that this forum and the conversations that have had, and the very open conversations that have been had between the brewers and supply chain partners is a great example of the right intent of the brewing industry to move forward for the greater good. So yeah, Europe can lead this. Europe must lead this. I think it is an absolute shout out for Europe.
Okay, thank you. Ivan's got to drop off the call in just a couple of minutes. So I want to give him some questions that we have coming through. Hidrin Godham again, is beer industry organic waste valued as fertilizers or biogas? Is there room for improvement? Ivan, good answer for that?
Well, I hope so. I am not the expert really in this field, but if there is a room for innovation, definitely I think there is room for improvement also in this case.
Okay, Tommaso Ferrando, even just stay with us in this one. 37% of EU farmers, says Tommaso, 37% of EU farmers' income is from CAP. This is public subsidy and dumping. Is this a level playing field?
Well, it's been a long discussion about common agriculture policy, and generally I have to say that subsidies are going down. And this is also my perspective that we should help more, say, competitive environment in agriculture, and therefore step by step we minimize the subsidies, because no, it is not sustainable. From European budget a couple of years ago, it was more than 50% common agriculture policy. Now it is roughly 1/3, and it is going down. So we cannot make this change from one year to another, but from long-term perspective, there will be less and less subsidies for agriculture, and definitely more competitive environment.
Okay, thank you. Just before you go, any last comments in summary for the panel? Ivan?
First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for invitation for this exciting event, because I do feel it was really, really useful also for all stakeholders. I learned a lot. What I'd like to highlight also, that the general trend in brewing industry is also there is a lot of innovation, there is a lot of awareness about Green Deal, a lot of activities, and a lot of new small players are coming into this industry, which is positive. And my last point would be that I think it would be useful also to create somehow the platform between small players and big players, and somehow to share experience, and at the end to achieve the common objective, which is sustainability of this industry from long-term perspective. Thank you.
Ivan, thank you so much for joining us. We'll speak with you again soon. The rest of the panel are going to stay with us, and we'll be joined by another colleague in just a few moments as well for some closing remarks. Q&A, we've got lots of questions to go through on the Q&A side here and some comments. Please send your comments and your questions now. We'll get through as many of those as we possibly can. Rosalina, we have one from Tomasina Ferrando. Water, besides human rights, is a commodity with inelastic demand. How can we rely on price signals? Any remark on that?
Well, price signals are very important because it's we have in European law the so-called polluter pays principle, so which is very important in order to ensure that whenever there are environmental impacts, it's actually the one who is responsible for the environmental impacts that is also responsible for bearing the costs of that. So price signals are very important, but in many cases we have also let's say certain common goods that are like water and so on and so forth, where it's needed to have regulation together with price signals in order to have the best impact. So as such, it's a multifaceted the issue as such, and it cannot be solved. Let's say well, there is no silver bullet. I think we have to act on many different aspects, and here, when we talk about indeed the brewery sector, we have, as we said, water. We also have the packaging, where indeed beer has been in the past using quite a lot of reusable packaging. We see, for instance, more and more in some cases the shift to the single-use packaging, more and more cans, which have their impacts as well. So the question is, how do we indeed solve all these various issues in a balanced way? And as I said, it's a multifaceted approach, and we have to act on many different areas in the life cycle. And this is what the product environmental footprint is about. If you see it, it's quite a lengthy report on the brewery, on the beer sector, but all the phases, the key phases, are covered, starting from indeed the farming, then through production, treatment of residues, consumption, transport, packaging, and end of life. And here, just about the residues, I would like to say that there are indeed good projects on how residues could be used. In one project, they were used for producing feed for aquaculture, so the yeast and the spent grain were used for that. There are also other projects on how to use spent yeast. So there are many applications. There are many different good ideas in how to encourage this so-called what we call the industrial symbiosis, how the output of one industry can be the input to another industry. And I think that here the brewery sector makes no exception to this.
Okay.
There are many
Let me ask Paolo about this
interesting.
then. Paolo, just these two
No,
elements
look,
as well. So water price signals and byproduct residue, the organic waste.
Look, I think Rosalina answered the price signals. It's not as simple as just keeping your eye on price. So I'm not going to comment more on that.
Okay.
I think on the alternative use for spent grains, absolutely yes. Is there more that we can do? Yes. The vast majority of spent grain actually goes to cattle feed, but it's actually quite rich in protein. So if you think about it from a product life cycle perspective, it ends up in steak or beef. So is there a better way of converting that protein residue in spent grain into a more sustainable and less manipulated approach to delivering that protein? Absolutely yes. So there is plenty we can do in that space.
Okay, thank you. Question for Rosalina, and this one comes from Simon. What tool is the European Commission using for measuring product footprints, for example, on water use?
Well, that's a very specific question, and here I would really invite you to go and look into the document. I mean, that well, it's not a very attractive invitation, I must say. But basically, when we estimate the environmental footprint, there are a number of indicators and criteria that are used, and I would not spend the last 10 minutes of this conversation to explain them. But basically, it's a full-fledged the analysis that takes into account the most important environmental impacts of a product. So that is where I will leave it at.
Thank you, very kind. Mark, Belgium's experience as well. What gives you hope for the sustainability of the sector? You're facing pressures on water supply. There are other issues to do with carbon pricing and how this is going to play out in the future as well. But the technology side of this seems to be robust. The ambition to do more and to create jobs in this sector in a sustainable way seems to be fairly positive, despite the moment that we're passing through with COVID. How do you see the Belgian sector, the beer sector, growing in a sustainable way? And what do you think that means for its global market positioning?
Well, it is growing. As I told you before, we have the figures, and it's growing exponentially. A lot of small businesses, which is indeed very good, also for in perspective of local economy and for local farmers and suppliers and so on. And this is it's also the branding. I mean, this is the beer brewing and tasting and drinking in smart way, of course, is in our DNA, and it is for the moment it is kind of a hype, and a lot of these producers want to do it in a sustainable way. It's a hype to taste good beers, regional beers, special with special taste, special beers. But it's also a hype to do it in a way that respects the resources that we have, and to use them in a sensible way, water, but also with respect to biodiversity, which is also one of the big issues here in this very densely populated area next to the North Sea. And I'm not pessimistic, but of course
But you see this
we have
as
to go on.
is it fair to describe this as a new wave of beer production in Belgium? Belgium has a long history of this. You've been doing it for hundreds of years, maybe even longer than that. But this sense of Belgium as a quality brand, as a cultural renovation, which you describe it yourself. You're bringing communities, the extension from farm, and the pride that people take in their products as well. There's an ambition there. Is this a mark of excellence now?
I think so, yes, and it's something to be proud of as Flemish or Belgian, and we are. It's the chocolates, it's the beer, it's the French fries, which should be Belgian fries, of course. But I mean, this is beer in itself is part of our culture, and cultivating that is there's a future in this, also for tourism and so on. So for the whole economy.
Okay, for our French audience, he's technically and historically correct, so our apologies if that offends you. They're not French fries, they're Belgian fries. Paolo, the excellence, the cultural excellence, do you see this as a new wave of beer culture as well? Of course, people will drink responsibly and we want them to do so, but the willingness to sample new products and the diversity in the market now as well. Is the environmental element of this, the eco-branding, something which is attached to this new wave?
I think it's a consequence. So I don't want to get into a heated debate with Mark around whether Czech beer, which is where I live, is better or not quite as good as Belgian beer or the other way around. But we absolutely stand by, certainly we do as a site, the PGI mark of České pivo, which is rooted in local sourcing, traditional methodology, and local production. So I think this notion of excellence, of simplicity, of naturalness has been understood, and we need to amplify that and amplify it through the platform of sustainability. And the Brewers of Europe, I have to say, over the last, for a good few years now, have worked incredibly hard to be an inclusive environment for large and small brewers that have been around for hundreds of years, and brewers that have been around for hundreds of days to be part of. So I'm a big fan of the work that we do in that space. I'm a big fan of spreading beer culture in a responsible way, but I'm also a big fan of impact. And for impact in sustainability, we need scale, and for scale, we need to collaborate. I see a lot of PR on little things, which are sound bites, and I'd like to see us as an industry and with our partners, with the support of the European governments, in moving forward on a scale basis and creating and sustaining infrastructure that is good for us, but good for our communities as well.
If you forgive the perspective of a journalist who trades in sound bites, they often have a grain of truth within them as well. Rosalina, this is a good news story for the European Commission, isn't it? You're always struggling to find ways to tell the general public, to explain complex policies. And here you have one. You have the sustainable beer industry. You have one that talks about community. One talks about environmental sustainability. One talks about huge steps forward in terms of what's possible in water conservation, carbon reduction as well. This is a great ambassador for the green agenda, isn't it?
I like a lot what Paolo says, because I mean that when we talk about let's say labeling, that you have a label that something is green, or that's not enough. It's not I mean that what we aim with our new policy is exactly to bring let's say sustainability, circularity from the niche to the mainstream. And for this just let's say certain claims are not enough. We need to make all the sectors sustainable, so we cannot put everything on the consumer to choose. I mean, because consumers, we as people, we have to make so many choices during the day. I don't think that we can, let's say, put the whole burden on the consumer. Well, we have, let's say, a green label, so choose that, and then it's your responsibility. We as a government and in business, we have a responsibility to try to make the whole system more sustainable. In order to do that, we need exactly this dialogue. We need these deals. initiative that Mark was talking about, and we need to gather all the people around the table so that indeed the green does not remain a niche, but it becomes the mainstream, and it just becomes a new way of doing things. So that's really very, very important. And the more we do that.
Are you
Sorry?
confident that is being achieved across Europe, that we're really beginning to embrace a new way of doing things?
Well, we have to be confident, right? I mean, if we are not, who would be? So we have to have ambition, and but we also will have to have the stamina to get through the reforms, because we have set the strategies, we have outlined the road, but we are very much a walk in the park. So there will be the transformation is quite challenging to get to climate neutrality, to get to achieve those objectives, and to be overconfident would be to be a bit stupid. So we are very much aware about the big challenge, but we are also very much willing to work on this together with all stakeholders.
Thank you. Just before I bring in Pierre-Olivier Bergeron, Secretary General of the Brewers of Europe, for our concluding remarks, let me invite each of our panelists just for a quick roundup of what struck them most, their key points. Paolo, 60 seconds. What's most important for you in this conversation now?
Oh, look, I mean, the most important thing is that we're having it. I just want to thank the Brewers of Europe and all of my colleagues on the board and the executive committees for actually making this happen. I think beyond this conversation, the event has been unique and a huge opportunity to share. I've had feedback from a number of colleagues around just how much they've learned. For me, some of the key messages around collaboration versus competition. We need to work together, both as brewers, large or small, and with our supply chain partners. I think there is a clear commitment to act, but we need to act at scale. Incremental is good. So that 2.8 to 2.75 within the breweries of water usage per litre, that's great. We must do that. But we must also go out there and build and provide the platform for the building of infrastructure with support in the area of carbon neutrality. And to a question you asked me earlier on, I think Europe can lead and must lead.
Thank you. Mark Demersmaker, 60 seconds.
Well, I like a lot what Paolo has said, and I see a lot of good things happening from my perspective here locally in Flanders. I see breweries, the sector that is learning, partners who are learning from each other and who are achieving results. We have this Green Deal 2018-2020, 22, sorry. After 1 year, a number of breweries managed to reduce their water use with half a hectoliter per hectoliter brewed beer. That is already a lot. And partners are learning from each other. They go in dialogue with the government. That is what we need, a dialogue also with the authorities to tackle the bottlenecks, because there are still bottlenecks, of course. So there is this dialogue between the sector and authorities to ask the government and authorities, you help us here to tackle these bottlenecks, give us let's work together for solutions. And I see a lot of good things happening, and I see the future in a positive way.
Thank you so much. Rosalina, last word.
Thank you. I think everything was said, and for me it's important that we are having this conversation, and we are having this conversation in a context where also business is under a lot of pressure from the economic crisis. We know how much difficulties beer producers have in these times, and the fact that even in those hard times we are thinking about a sustainable future, about improving our environmental performance, that we bring together all the elements from production, agriculture, to water use, to residues, to packaging together, and we are able to make a positive story out of this. For me, this is the most important thing, because this is the attitude, and this is the way how we have to look in the future in order to make make this a success and to ensure that indeed we have an economy that works for people, and that the sector, next to indeed a lot of pleasure to people, can bring also better environmental impact for our planet. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks to all our panelists today, Rosalina, Ivan, Mark, and Paolo. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And now just to introduce Pierre-Olivier Bergeron. He's the Secretary General of the Brewers of Europe. Good afternoon, sir. Great to see you. And the floor is yours for concluding remarks.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you once again to Euractiv for hosting this closing session of the Brewers of Europe Sustainability Forum. Most importantly, thank you to the 30 speakers and session moderators and to over 900 registered attendees. You have made this event a great success by engaging in the discussions around the steps brewers can take to integrate sustainability. It emphasizes the important role our sector plays in European life. I echo the thoughts of our president, who opened this forum yesterday morning, lamenting the fact that we could not all meet together physically. However, I think that the past 2 days have shown how our sector can adapt quickly and embrace the opportunity of virtual events. We require the agility and solidarity shown over the past 2 days more than ever. As I speak to you now, we are again facing an extremely difficult time for brewers and the entire hospitality sector, with many bars, cafes and pubs facing a lengthy shutdown and a threat to their very existence. In many ways, the impact of the pandemic has been amplified by the great uncertainty around how the situation will evolve, leading to stress and worry for all involved: brewers, business owners, our supply chain, employees, and their families. The societal impact of the pandemic has struck the heart of our sector, but it also creates a need to bounce back better and stronger to create a greener, more resilient and sustainable Europe. But before COVID-19 came to our shores, we were already facing what many have called the greatest challenge of our time: climate change and environmental sustainability. Some of the facts before the pandemic could not have been more certain, and they remain the same today. Without drastic action to tackle the climate crisis, we cannot change the future. We've heard from brewers over the last 2 days how they've responded to those facts and what actions they are already taking, driven by their consumers and the need to fully integrate sustainability throughout their businesses. We've shown that there is substance, knowledge, innovation, and action behind the bold declarations and ambitions that we've made and set. I think it's incredible, the advances that have been made. From upgrades to packaging, changes to the way beer is transported, to using more clean energy and running sustainable breweries. The technical innovations we discussed today and yesterday are even just a small snapshot of how the ancient practice of brewing has moved with the times. This challenge is not new. We know what must be done. And breweries, large, small and micro, collectively and together with their partners throughout the value chain, are all playing their part. They're ambitious to achieve these goals, with a strong mindset driving them to further step up and extend their actions at all stages of the value chain. As the Brewers of Europe, we share in these ambitions, mirroring those of the European Union's Farm to Fork strategy and European Green Deal. Beer is rooted in nature and ultimately the future of the world we live in is dependent on the way we operate and how we choose to make an investment in sustainability today. To the Commission and members of the Parliament who were represented here today, I wanted to say that we are your partners. We're committed to continuing our sustainability story and to leading by example in our sector and beyond. Thank you very much once again. Please continue the conversation about sustainability online, on social media, and hopefully in the not too distant future in a bar over a beer.
Pierre-Olivier, thank you so much. I love the reference to the ancient culture of brewing today, a fitting finale. And now that brings to an end the Brewers of Europe Sustainability Forum. 2 days of intense and inspiring interaction and discussion. There's a lot of chat going on the chat room, some very technical details as well. We're encouraged to see that yesterday in particular. And our thanks to everyone who participated in the last 2 days. For more information on everything that was discussed, go to brewing4.eu, and you can track #brewing4EU on social media, where the sustainability conversation will continue for some time. And once the lockdown restrictions permit, please continue to support the sector and the hospitality industry by tweeting or Instagramming #reconnect, preferably do so over a beer. And the #reconnect is being run as part of the Brewers of Europe ongoing support for the sector. So thanks again for your cooperation to all our panelists today and our outstanding team here at Euractiv as well, Mike, Evie, Simona and Tamara. Thanks for their assistance. I'm Brian Maguire. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll see you soon.